The execution of Charles I in 1694 is often remembered as a domestic conflict. King versus Parliament, Cavaliers versus Roundheads, Anglicanism versus Puritanism. Yet the alternative media narrative, popularized in A History of Central Banking, written by an ex-central banker, portrays a different story. Cromwell and the regicide of the king were allegedly orchestrated by Jewish financiers such as Ebenezer Pratt, who supposedly funneled money to Parliament in exchange for political concessions and influence over England's financial system. Now, you can find many videos which explore this theme and this compelling angle. Instead, this video explores evidence which seems to present a far more complex reality. Please do follow the story carefully, and there's really quite a fascinating twist at the end of the video. Previously, we've seen that following the mixed moneys case of 1604, the king had the legal ability to determine what constitutional money meant within his realm. This made the sovereign an effective de facto central bank. Remember, in Kublai Khan's Yuan dynasty, he conducted effective open market operations to expand or contract the money supply as needed, which was discussed in the book Marco Polo's Travels, which had circulated across Europe at the time. This is important context, as there was therefore no need for the English state to borrow from creditors. Even so, Charles I's reign was marred by fiscal mismanagement. Indeed, around 1626, he imposed what became known as a forced loan, where wealthy subjects were commanded to lend to finance foreign wars, including the failed expeditions to Cadiz and La Rochelle. In reality, it was a wealth tax where refusal would see subjects summoned before the Privy Council and even imprisonment without trial. Much of the money raised was never repaid, and this permanently damaged royal credit. Merchants and the gentry learned that lending to the king could actually mean effective confiscation. Worse still, after dissolving Parliament in 1629, he relied on coercive taxation, ship money, revived feudal dues, and he enabled monopolies on commodities like salt and tobacco. Such policies naturally drove capital away from Britain, despite his apparent mercantilist facade. Merchants and goldsmiths lost confidence in the king's desire to honour his debts. Moreover, Charles refused to raise the mint price of silver and recognise the real value of the coin. This led to capital flight as bullion naturally fled to Amsterdam. For depositing bullion at the Bank of Amsterdam offered merchants a far superior return, both in terms of security, liquidity, and access to profitable trade, rather than depositing it at the Tower Mint. Indeed, the relationship between the City of London Corporation and Amsterdam had flourished from the 1620s onwards. In addition, Charles had farmed customs to merchant syndicates who had Dutch connections. These financiers were allowed to profit from their own exchange operations and bullion trading. These privileges really acted as an effective subsidy to engage in cross-border arbitrage. They were able to use royal revenues as leverage for private speculation in Amsterdam. Charles could also have sought to re-establish credibility through accepting parliamentary oversight of borrowing. Instead, his stance led him to borrow from private creditors and offshore channels. His reign marked a period of domestic economic destabilisation, which empowered Amsterdam as a safe haven for English capital, and by which Parliament became the only means of restoring credibility. In short, he had created the structural conditions that enabled parliamentary and military challenge to his authority. When the English Civil War broke out in 1642, it represented the culmination of decades of fiscal, religious, and constitutional tension under Charles. The Royalists or Cavaliers supported Charles courtesy of feudal Jews, Royalist states, as well as contributions and looting and local taxation. Meanwhile, the parliamentarians or Roundheads had support, which included, of course, the members of Parliament, urban elites, City of London Corporation, merchants and city guilds. The alternative narrative considers Amsterdam's Sephardic Jews and their networks to have been the apparent sole financiers of the rebellion. These Jews had been expelled from Spain and Portugal following the Edict of Alhambra in 1492. Many resettled in Amsterdam. Of course, things sadly did not improve for the people of Spain despite the Jews' departure. They endured a torrid time as Spain declared multiple bankruptcies. Monarchs had opted to repeatedly fund the conquest of Latin America, as well as various military campaigns from external sources, which impoverished its people in the process, something we discussed previously here. Lenders to the Spanish Empire include the Fugger family, the Weslers, Genoese bankers, as well as Dutch and Flemish financiers, all of whom imposed harsh conditionalities. Lending was typically borrowed against future revenues, and despite its vast silver plunder, Spain failed to meet its obligations repeatedly as a result of its incredible economic mismanagement by successive monarchs. By the late 16th century, Spain was controlled by the Habsburg monarchy as a result of dynastic inheritance and conquest. The Habsburg European territories consisted of Spain, the Netherlands, Burgundy, Italian possessions including Naples, Milan and Sicily, the Holy Roman Empire and Austria, while overseas territories included vast dominions from Mexico to Peru in the Americas, the Caribbean and the Philippines, as well as Atlantic trade routes and control over key ports such as Cadiz and Seville. They had pursued numerous dynastic marriages with the House of Orange in the Dutch Republic. Intermarriages also tied the Habsburgs to the Bourbon family of France, as well as the Medici, who were original financiers of Columbus's conquest. Now, more to come on them shortly. And in England, Mary I had previously married Philip II of Spain, which had brought temporary dynastic links to the nation, but there were no offspring. Such a pervasive presence would clearly have meant significant ties to the City of London, particularly given the strong structural trade financial links between the Habsburgs' dominions and the city. Now, this dynastic context is vitally important. The City of London and its livery companies played a crucial supporting role in the parliamentary war effort during the English Civil War. London merchants and institutions provided loans and credit, engaged in contracts to supply the armies, and leveraged the city's wealth and trading infrastructure. While London may not have been the only financial engine of Parliament, its contribution was indispensable. Even then, London was a crucial node in the overall financial network. Its institutional framework represented a significant step towards modern banking. The city's guilds managed pooled capital, oversaw disbursement, and coordinated external intermediaries. It's a proto-central banking function that would crystallise later into the Bank of England. To that end, the fact that Mitford Goodson in the history of central banking ignores the role of the City of London is curious. Instead, he places the focus upon the influence of individual financiers, arguing that Ebenezer Pratt and others coordinated international flows to support Cromwell. The main evidence that is offered here is this apparent correspondence. 16th of June 1647 from O.C. Oliver Cromwell by Ebenezer Pratt. In return for financial support, will advocate admission of Jews to England. This, however, impossible while Charles living. Charles cannot be executed without trial, adequate grounds for which do not at present exist. Therefore advise that Charles be assassinated, but will have nothing to do with arrangements for procuring an assassin, though willing to help in his escape. In reply, apparently was dispatched the following. 12th of July 1647 to O.C. by E. Pratt. Will grant financial aid as soon as Charles removed and Jews admitted. Assassination too dangerous. Charles shall be given opportunity to escape. His recapture will make trial and execution possible. The support will be liberal but useless to discuss terms until trial commences. Now, I can't find the primary source for this information, which is apparently a lost volume of synagogue records, and it remains unclear as to what role Pratt is actually playing here, whether he's an intermediary or director. Nonetheless, an interesting narrative. So unsurprisingly, the far superior finance of the parliamentarians ensured victory, and I've broken down the sources of this financing for both sides in this table. Now, clearly this presents a far more nuanced picture than commonly presented or understood. When open fighting began, Gerbier, Charles I's resident in Brussels and a long-time art dealer, was instructed to pawn or sell part of the royal plate and jewels to obtain coin and munitions from overseas. In a letter of November 1642, he wrote that Amsterdam and Antwerp were the only marts where ready money may be had upon jewels. He negotiated with 2 Amsterdam banking houses, which are unnamed in the letter, but probably members of the Portuguese Jewish trading diaspora. Now, they offered an advance of about £40,000 on jewels valued near double that. Gerbier reported that the terms were so harsh that His Majesty would lose near half his treasure, but he had no alternative. Soon, the Dutch credit houses viewed the Royalists as insolvent and refused to lend more. Interestingly, I've not been able to find any primary evidence of funds supporting the parliamentarians, courtesy of Amsterdam's bankers or the Bank of Amsterdam. Any support for Parliament may have actually come indirectly, if there was some, via London's merchant flows perhaps. Instead, as the table highlights, financing appears to have been almost exclusively domestic. Following the defeat of the Royalists, Charles was captured and imprisoned. He refused to accept parliamentary sovereignty over taxation and legislation, and was later found guilty of treason and executed in 1649. The unprecedented act of regicide led to the abolishment of the monarchy and House of Lords, and England was proclaimed a Commonwealth. In 1653, Cromwell became Lord Protector, but his death destabilised the Protectorate. A restoration was negotiated, and Parliament then invited Charles II, who was Charles I's son, to take the throne. Now, what I find fascinating here is that Charles II was descended from the Medici, as we can see in this family tree of the Stuart line. Both Charles I and Charles II had links to the Habsburgs, the Bourbons, and distantly the House of Orange. The apparent anomaly is that Charles I had no Medici descent that I can find. What followed in Charles II's rule had enormous ramifications for the people of England and far beyond, which we'll have to consider in an upcoming video. Now, I hope you found this fascinating. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye.